Okay, very good. Thanks again for joining. This is Barbara Bishop at West Georgia RESA. I'm the Director of School Improvement and Professional Learning here, and today I'm bringing you some information about close reading instruction, some resources and strategies that we learned as we were a part of a close reading conference, a Common Core close reading conference in the summer of 2012. Dr. Robin Smith at Middle Georgia RESA and I were able to go to this conference and bring back what we believe are some really great resources and ideas. This presentation includes those along with a few other ideas that we have gathered along the way. So I want to start with this rather intimidating little passage here. This is an example of a qualitatively complex text. It would be complex for anyone, regardless of grade level. The materials and ideas that we're discussing today are appropriate in any Common Core classroom where close reading is used, and we specifically find the appropriateness level at grades 3 through 8. This particular paragraph is an adult example, just to give us a starting point for our discussion. So many times we have selected as teachers some very rigorous, qualitatively rich text and asked kids to access it. And I know in my own teaching at the high school level, I was guilty many times of using the phrase, read this carefully. Let's read carefully. Be sure and read this carefully. Did you read that carefully, etc. So we're trying to use some terminology that means a lot more than just read carefully. I put the phrase up here to remind us and to remind me that when you ask somebody to read carefully, it is very difficult to gauge whether or not they are doing so. So part of our close reading strategies are intended to make more public and more overt the actual reading process. And so we're going to talk about a protocol for close reading, and we're going to use this and another passage as an example. So our objectives, our learning targets for this session, to gain more knowledge into how we teach students to read closely and critically, to get a working definition of close reading, and to understand the importance of close reading routines, particularly as we work within the college and career expectations of the Common Core curriculum. And we want to see, additionally, during this session, what does close reading look like, and how do you teach close reading to students? What are you currently doing that already supports this kind of close reading, and what might you want to change in your instruction in order to lead students more directly to close reading success? So Dr. Douglas Fisher, among others, have said that the Common Core curriculum, the state standards, require that students read closely as they provide evidence and justification for their answers. This particular close reading protocol strategy that we're going to discuss is based on justification. It's not worried too much about whether or not a student is right with a capital R. It instead is focusing on building the confidence for students to make their own determinations about what they think and to be able to justify what words within the text or what inferences they made from the words in the text that led them to that belief. So you likely remember the Partnership for the Assessment of Readiness of College and Career. That entity continues for many states to be the assessment organization for the Common Core ELA, literacy, and math. In our state, the PARC is not going to serve as the assessment entity. However, we have been told that the milestones test that our students are working towards, our second-generation assessments, if you will, are very much PARC-like. And so the advances described by the PARC in the ELA and literacy for for Common Core standards remain very relevant to us. And I like this slide in particular because this slide is, I believe, in one visual, the big ideas in both math and ELA. The big changes, the big advances or shifts, as they sometimes call them, is that we have moved to a place where informational text is now as important as literary text had been in the past, that we now emphasize argument, informative, explanatory writing, and research, that speaking and listening have their rightful place at the table with reading, writing, and research, more so now than they ever did before, and also that we expect and invite and thank our colleagues in 6-12 grades, history, science, social studies, and technical subjects for directly teaching ELA Common Core literacy standards with us, and that's, of course, going to help. So this is one of my favorite little images. It is a reminder that indeed with Common Core, reading and writing are truly married. And that has always been best practice. It has always been a great idea for reading and writing to be integrated, and for the listening and speaking and the research and the reading and the writing all strands to move naturally in and out of one another. That's always been best practice. But now it's much more than best practice. It is like the instructional mandate. It's the expectation. And I found from one of the DOE ELA reporters this wonderful quote that I believe a teacher in North Georgia had come up with. She said, "I will no longer read without a pen in my hand or write without a book on my desk." And I like to tell the students that that is the wedding vow that reading and writing have taken. And, of course, it doesn't necessarily have to be a pen. It could be any way in which you are annotating or highlighting a text, engaging with the text in a critical way. And it also doesn't have to be technically a book, but there's any sort of source there that would be with it. It's a great reminder that the purpose of reading is to find out information that you then would want to express and write about, and that when you are writing, you are expressing something that you just recently read or heard. So that integration is key to this close reading process. In fact, this close reading process becomes a close writing process. Whoops, okay. So the big idea behind close reading, as related in the conference that we went to, is that it's an intentionally designed experience analyzing. And I recognize that that needs to be unpacked, so we'll go bit by bit through it. It's intentional because the teacher is strategically choosing what is close read. And it is designed because the teacher is setting a very specific strategic purpose question for the reading. It's an experience because it is intended to be social and oral and fun, and requires the students to share and discuss with one another. And it also requires analyzing, which of course is the squished together word that you get when you think of both highlighting and annotating. And in one of our recent ELA Academy sessions, we asked a number of teachers to describe the difference between highlighting and annotating, and they provided lots of great examples. One in particular that struck me as being very useful to tell the kids is that highlighting is when you're emphasizing what is there, and annotating is when you are adding to what is there. So the highlighting is a selective process where you decide what is important, and then annotating is where you add to the text your own ideas along the way. And I want us to think for a moment about music students, just as an analogy that I think is useful. When kids are in choir or band class, orchestra, the teacher gives them a performance piece, and maybe 5 or 6 of them, and they work on them over and over and over again, sort of like we do sometimes in ELA, where we take a novel or a short story and we spend weeks and weeks on it, which is not necessarily a bad thing. But my point is that when the kids are done, they are able to play, quote unquote, or perform that piece, and that's wonderful. And they can give a big concert, but it's still a reflection of what had been brought to them through the adults. And so when it's time for them to really be tested on their musical skill, when they are headed to a conservatory to try to get a scholarship, for example, they are not asked to play, one of the pieces that they played in a recent concert. In fact, the committee would not want to hear that. Instead, the committee wants to give them a sight reading piece. And that's the equivalent to our cold reads that our students will find on our second generation assessments on our milestones test. And the cool thing about these cold reads is that when they are very carefully chosen, then they have a wide range of possibility for any student to show their stuff. So for example, if the music committee chose a Bach piece and they wanted the kids to play that, it could be that that particular piece is solid enough and has enough structure that even somebody who's a struggling musician could start it and make their way through it and sort of make some sense with it. But yet it still has to have enough incredible opportunity and musical sensibility that some of the very, very high music contenders for this scholarship could really show their amazing abilities. Although I know that took me a little while to explain that scenario and that analogy, my point is that in the same way that a true musician knows exactly what piece of music would make a wonderful audition piece, a wonderful sight read, teachers, English teachers, intuitively know what would make for a very excellent close read. First of all, there are a few characteristics of a close reading passage that we want to understand and to value, and we'll talk some more about them as I move forward. The part where the students are analyzing, in some close reading protocols, there are very specific notes, such as what's on the screen here, like maybe put a star by what's important, or put a check next to things you understand, put an exclamation point by something that surprises you. And certainly this kind of a key and these kind of symbol notations would be great. And there are many students who could work toward this kind of analyzing. But this particular close reading process protocol that we want to show you today does not involve a lot of different symbols. In fact, it just zeroes in on one of them, and that's circling. And so we're going to show you how we can use the idea of analyzing and still get the value of analyzing, but simply only work with circles. And I like to use this as an example because I think that as the analyzing key gets less complicated, the more grade levels can participate in this kind of a process. So close reading is different than regular reading. And regular reading, and of course I know that you guys know this, but this is something we want the kids to recognize, that close reading is different than other reading. You might read for pleasure, you might read to find out content. Close reading is when you are, where the purpose of your reading is to have an engaging conversation with the author, and the author is not even there. You are examining how something was created. How did this thing get written? How did this thing become this thing? What has happened here in the writing? You're examining it for that purpose. Maybe the text itself is about the science behind the internet. That doesn't mean you're trying to learn about the science behind the internet. If you were reading in order to learn that content, then that would be a different kind of reading. Close reading is more than just careful reading. It's more than just reading without being distracted. It's more than just reading and taking notes. It is reading in order to determine how the piece was written. Here are just a few quotes that I think help relate this back to the Common Core. We do recognize that close reading is a close and intensive analysis of a text, trying to come to terms with what it says, yes, but also how it says it and what it means. It's a careful and purposeful reading and rereading, and it's a social experience. In order for the kids to be successful in college and career, military, beyond, they're going to need the skills of analysis, of reason, of argument, interpretation, precision, and accuracy. And the big idea behind this particular close reading strategy is to build the confidence for students to make statements about text. The Common Core reading #1 umbrella standard or anchor standard, whatever you might want to call it, the one that shows us the end product for the high school graduates, is that students will read closely to determine what the text says explicitly, make logical inferences from it, and cite specific textual evidence when writing or speaking to support conclusions drawn from the text. In other words, the terms read closely and also the terms read independently are found running completely through the standards for reading, and also echoed again in writing, where students will write independently. We're looking for a rich and rigorous evidence-based conversation about the text amongst students and teachers, and to have students revisit the text for evidence and to support their argument in logical, careful, and precise ways. But we also want to manage all of this without having the added complications of the text complexity, and so we want to pare down the actual reading task to an action that is very easy for all students to handle, and that's why we're going to go with circling, and we'll get to that in just a second. Textbooks are not necessarily the best place to find the kind of qualitatively rich piece that you would use for your close reading. Textbooks often include content that is valuable for you to read and then know and memorize, rather than simply read in order to analyze how it was written. Okay, so here's the important slide. This is the picture slide that shows the suggested protocol for this close reading process that we're going to work with today. And it is, just like all things, I believe it is best used after you decide how it should be modified for your kids, for your time period, for your grade level, for your resources, etc. So I encourage you to think about how you might modify this process to best suit your needs based on your professional knowledge. But before that, I just want to go over the way it had been presented to me. And so here's how it had been presented to me. Step 1, the teacher does most of the magic in step 1 by finding a short, robust text. It is qualitatively rich. And the lessons and text-dependent questions that, or the text-dependent question that the teacher comes up with for that reading requires a repeated reading and is special and pertinent to that passage. And we're going to work through this in just a second. But the next thing that happens is that the kids are given the robust short text, which is admittedly too hard for them to read. That's the whole point. You don't give them something that they are going to be able to accomplish. You're going to give them something that they can only read with your assistance, because that's what this time is. It's the time with your assistance. It's the safe time in your room. It's the risk-free environment. It's not during the summative, end of grade or end of course milestone test. It is during the classroom time. So it is with the safety of your help and with the benefit of your expertise. So in the same way that when you go to the gym, your trainer doesn't say, oh, show me what you can do easily. Instead, the trainer gives you something you think that you can't do. And maybe you can't do it. Maybe you're going to try to do it, and it's going to not look pretty, right? But that's what we want. We want that stretch. We want that rigor. We want that difficulty. And even if the result is, wow, this is a little too hard for me, I think I will need your help, well, then all you've really done there is show that you've chosen something worth taking a look at in terms of your text that you chose. Anyway, so the kids are going to spend, we're looking at that green column now, that second column. The students are going to do their annotation with pencil or pen, sticky notes, whatever. The way that I suggest that they do it is just with a pen or a pencil and only with circles. And when we work through the actual text here in a moment, I'll show you what that looks like. And the students are going to take the reading question that you've given them, the reading purpose, and go in search of some textual evidence and find it and put circles on it. Now, some kids in this minute and a half of independent reading might not circle anything. I mean, this is, in fact, something that you've given them that is too hard for them to read. Some of them will not circle anything. That is okay. What's going to happen in the remainder of the lesson with the social supports with everyone else is going to still bring that student to a point where he can or she can engage with the text. But it's important that you have the minute and a half, 2 minutes, just very brief interaction with the text independently, even if the result is, wow, I don't even know where to begin, right? Because you want everyone to have that opportunity for that rigor. And then the safety net comes in when, okay, well, if you didn't get very far, that's okay, because now we're working together. All right, then in the third column, the teacher is going to read aloud to model prosody. And if you remember your reading instruction courses in college or your master's degree or other PL or whatever, then you likely remember that prosody is one of our terms for the music of the language, the inflection. And a reader with true comprehension of any given text is able to read with a great deal of inflection and natural stress on the rhythm and the key words that would be emphasized. You are the very best reader in the whole room. That is just the absolute truth. And so this is the time in the course of the class period where what the kids are getting is an opportunity to hear you read. And although it can sometimes be unnatural or even annoying or embarrassing to read out loud with a great deal of expression, that's what the kids need. And research shows that the students who are able to hear the natural inflections and the music of a text are more likely to comprehend it. It builds their own fluency ability, which is connected to their comprehension ability. But certainly you don't want to do this for too long. So the teacher is going to read aloud the model prosody, but only for like maybe 60 seconds, just so the kids can go, oh, that's what it would sound like if I were like a really great reader and I read that out loud. That's what that would sound like. Then this is where the fun part is. The kids are going to work together, and they are going to share what they circled and talk about why they circled it. And then the teacher is going to lead them through a social process where we are outing into the full group discussion what individual students have circled and talked about. And then at the end, the teacher is going to read the same thing that the kids read independently, but she or he is going to read it out loud along with the the thinking, with the modeling of the thinking that would go along with it. So thanks for hanging in there as I went over these little steps. Now we're going to talk about how to actually get that accomplished. I'm going to back out of the PowerPoint for a moment to take you to a particular web page. It is www.tinyurl.com/close reading resources. I'll say that again in a second. And it has a capital C and a capital R and a capital R. That's tinyurl.com/close reading resources with a capital C, R, and R. And that's where this PowerPoint resides, as well as a number of other resources that would be very helpful in the teaching of close reading per this kind of protocol. I want to scroll to the bottom to show you that this link here, the sample lessons from the Common Core's Achieve.org, if you click there, it takes you directly to some featured lessons at Achieve the Core that are close reading model lessons. Now, the way that they organized their close reading model lessons is a little bit different than the protocol that that I'm showing you here, but that doesn't matter, because if you click on each of these different close reading model lessons that they've provided, they have a very extensive teacher like guide that goes along with how to do it. But the main thing that's of value here, in my opinion, is that they have found appropriate texts that work well at different grade levels for close reading. For example, The Fisherman and His Wife, translated by Lucy Crane, that particular segment that they have provided here along with the instructions that they suggest for the teacher is very effective for grade 3 fiction close reading. And if you scroll down further, you see here's an example of a grade 7 nonfiction digestive process close reading passage. And so it's just very useful that they have found a number of them. These are by no means the only ones out there. You can Google close reading, grade 5 appropriate, any of those kind of terms. And if you look for close reading passages or close reading text, you'll find a lot to choose from. But again, you as the intuitive English teacher, you're the one who would go, yeah, that's very much what they need to be looking at right now, and it is indeed too hard for them, so let's tackle it. All right, now I'm going to go back to this page to show you that the PowerPoint that we're working through right now is also here on this page at PowerPoint for Professional Learning, right here, the shorter session. And here are a few of the texts that we suggest that that were suggested for us also at the conference as being very useful for close reading. I'm going to click on one now called Superman and Me by Sherman and Lexi, and let me download it so we can get at it easier. And come on. While it's loading, I want to show you also that on that page, on that web page we looked at, there's also a template for something called Clock Buddies. Clock Buddies you might have used before, and if you Google Clock Buddies, you can find many different ones. Like this one has a place for appointments at all the different hours, but I've also seen some that just have like a 12 o'clock, a 3 o'clock, a 6 o'clock, a 9 o'clock appointment. Anyway, this form could be used by students to get appointments, quote unquote. So you'd walk around and kids would say, do you have anybody for your 3 o'clock appointment? And they'd say, no, not yet. Okay, well, I'll put my name here, and you put your name here. And then when the teacher says, okay, it's time for your 3 o'clock appointment, it doesn't have to actually be 3 o'clock, obviously. Then that's who you would partner up with. Kids like knowing that throughout the course of the class period, they may get to meet with different buddies. They don't know, like, whether or not you're going to say, okay, it's 1 o'clock, time to meet with your 1 o'clock buddy, or okay, it's 8 o'clock, time to meet with your 8 o'clock buddy. So that it gives you a little bit of strategy. I've seen teachers take a worksheet like this, a little appointment clock like this, and strategically put their own name at like maybe 6 o'clock. And so then, everybody in the class has the same form. Everybody's walking around getting appointments, but it just so happens that one student is handed a form where 6 o'clock is already pre-filled in with Mrs. Bishop or whatever, so that the teacher can say, okay, it's 6 o'clock, and know that that while other kids have little partners to go to, this particular kid is going to work with you. So that's just a little byproduct there. All right, so so here is the Superman and me passage that I want us to look at. Oh, goodness gracious. Okay, excuse me for a second. I want to open it up so we can write on it. Okay. So I was told that this is an appropriate early middle school close reading passage. The actual Superman and Me by Sherman Alexie is much longer than this, but I've just taken the first 2 paragraphs and decided as the teacher that I'm going to do a close reading with these 2 paragraphs. I've read it before. I'm the one who chose it as step 1 of close reading. I'm also the one who chose the purpose question for it. And so Superman and Me by Sherman Alexie, I give it to the kids, and I tell them we are just going to look at the first 2 paragraphs, and I want to know something. I try to avoid using words like read this carefully, or we're going to read something that's really hard, or it's time to read. I just want to say I want to find out what you think. And so I would like for everyone to, and I usually just pick a number, like 4 maybe. We are going to be circling 4 things, okay? And now kids who don't like to read, kids who think they can't read, they might be willing to hang in there with you in the activity if you word that what they're doing is not reading but circling. Okay, so I want to know what you think. I want you to circle 4 words, or 4 words and phrases if you want to. But I've read this before, and so as a teacher, what I know about it is that there are many details in the first 2 paragraphs that give an indication of his socioeconomic status. It doesn't come right out and say, my socioeconomic status was this, but there are lots of details, lots of evidence, lots of inferences that might be made about it. So I tell the students, here's your reading purpose. And I tell the kids, we're going to read the first 2 paragraphs, and I want you to circle evidence. Of course, I can use any language I want. I can, I can say, find examples. I can say cite evidence. I can say circle evidence. Just depends on who I'm working with. But circle evidence of his, sorry, I have to write this little thing, of his, and according on, depending on what grade I'm working with, I could say his socioeconomic status, or his wealth, or of his parents' income. I'll just use income for this example. Okay, so the kids are, according to the PowerPoint, are going to, by themselves, we're working on this step right here, with a pencil or a pen, just simply circle those words or phrases. So I give them the reading, I give them the reading question, and in this case the reading question was circle evidence of his income. And so some kids might at this point just go to town and circle all kinds of examples. I could tell some kids circle 4 pieces of evidence. I could tell some just to circle evidence, and they might circle more. So there's some opportunity for differentiation there. But we want the kids to have a chance to do this by themselves. So I'm walking around and watching as the kids are circling. If I walk around and I see somebody has circled, I am 3 years old, I have an opportunity there to stop and speak with them if I want, or I can let it go. If I want to stop and speak, I can say, "Oh, you circled, I was 3 years old. How did that, tell me why did you circle that? How does that help you know his income?" And at that point, you might out for that student, that he doesn't know what income means, or he might go, "Oh, okay, I get it. I wasn't supposed to circle that." Or you might be able to have just a chance to discuss with him why he circled it. If you're walking by and you see somebody who has circled nothing, you might say, "Hey, I want you to start right here. Will you read right here with me? We were poor by most standards, but one of my parents usually managed." And at this point, you could even stop and say, "Wait a minute. I think it came right out and told me something about his income. Do you see a word there that gives this evidence of his income?" And then the kids be like, "Okay, yeah, poor, whatever." You might have other kids who are just circling like crazy. Regular paycheck, government surplus, food, etc., etc. All right, so you let the kids do their 2 minutes or 1 minute, however long you want, of little assistance just so they can get started. And then the next step for us is, sorry, no, I know I've drawn on this, sorry. So the next thing is that the teacher's going to read this aloud to model prosody, okay? And in the process of doing that, you're not worried too much about the reading purpose, the reading question for right now. You're going to get to that in a minute. But you just go back and say, "Okay, I'd like everyone to follow along." I usually say, "Put your finger in the air, please." Of course, kids already think I'm crazy, so they'll be like, "Whatever." But I say, "Put your finger in the air," and then I say, "Now I want you to follow along with me. Follow along with your finger." And the reason why I say that students should follow along with their finger is because sometimes kids need to follow along in that way, and many of them know that they will follow along better if they use their finger, but it's not usually socially acceptable to read, with your finger if you're like an older student. But if you, as the teacher, have said that's what I want you to do, then you sort of give social permission to those kids who might want to do it but might not want to lose face that having to do it. And then those kids who don't want to do it aren't going to do it anyway, so it doesn't matter. But I'd say follow along with your finger as I read. And now this is where you want to read with prosody. It is that library lady's voice. It can be very annoying. It can be very over the top, but that's what they actually need. They need you to overemphasize how this would be read aloud. And you, as the best reader in the room, are the person that they need to hear do this. So I'll do this just for a few seconds, just so we can have that part of it done. So Superman and Me by Sherman Alexie. I learned to read with a Superman comic book. Simple enough, I suppose. I cannot recall which particular Superman comic book I read, nor can I remember which villain he fought in that issue. I cannot remember the plot, nor the means by which I obtained the comic book. What I can remember is this. I was 3 years old, a Spokane Indian boy living with his family on the Spokane Indian Reservation in eastern Washington State. And that's just as far as I would go, because you've already established they already get it. Even just reading those 2 sentences or so, 3 sentences, they now get it. They now understand like what it would sound like if it were read out loud by a very capable reader. And the good news is we're the best readers in the room. The bad news is perhaps we're the best readers because we're old, right? So now here's the fun part. This is where the kids actually are going to do the work of the analysis. Now you say, okay, I want you to meet with your appointment buddies, and at that point the kids can find their person, you could say, it's 3 o'clock, and so now they get to meet with their 3 o'clock appointment. Or if you didn't want to deal with appointment clocks and all that, you could just say work with a table partner or elbow partner, or you could have them in groups in some other way. But what you tell them is that for 2 or 3 minutes, and I always like to give them a little deadline, you are going to tell your friend, what did you circle and why did you circle it? That actually means you're going to reread the text, you're going to discuss the text, you're going to analyze the text, you're going to justify your evidence, but you don't say all that necessarily. You just say, what did you circle and why did you circle it? And then you walk around and, if necessary, flat out lead them through these conversations. Some kids can just go at it and they're having their textual discussion and it's all wonderful, and other kids might just sort of sit there. You might have to say, okay, well, let me help you. It looks like you circled this word. Tell us why you circled this word. Oh, did you circle this word, etc. So you let them have that discussion for a few minutes, and then you say, okay, I am looking for twins. And this is where you can write on the board, or type on computer to project, or whatever, document camera, whatever you have. But you say, I'm looking for twins. I am looking for people, 2 people, who circled the same thing. And if they both circled the same thing, then there's a pretty good likelihood that what they circled actually is a piece of evidence indicating his income. And so at that point, you can say, who wants to volunteer? And you can have kids begin in the full group to say what they circled. So for example, where's my thing? So for example, the kids could say, well, I circled minimum wage job. Now, at that point, you have a student who made an inference in the text, and 2 of them, I guess, because they were twins. At which point you can now say, that is wonderful. You made an inference in the text. It didn't come right out and say, I didn't have much money, but it did say that your parents had minimum wage jobs. And if they circled that, then they probably know what a minimum wage job is, which means you can then say, please explain to everyone what a minimum wage job is, and help them through that little conversation. Then you could say, I'm looking for more twins. And somebody else might say, I circled poor, and my 3 o'clock appointment person also circled poor. At which point you could say, wonderful, you found the explicit evidence in the text. And I usually tell folks, we were only circling a few. We didn't have a lot of time. But now that we're all together and there's many readers, we're probably going to find more examples since there's so many of us. So if you did not already have this circled, go ahead and circle it. And so then that's another opportunity for the kids to find the word poor and circle it, find the word minimum wage job and circle it. So it's returning to the text again. You can go on with the task of having kids discuss what they both circled for as long as you wish, until you get lots of examples on the board. And then I usually say, now I'm looking for the surprisers. I don't want to say who circled something your friend didn't, because it could be that there's a reason why your friend didn't circle it. It could be that what you circled is sort of crazy, and your friends just didn't see it that way. And so rather than focus on possible misinterpretation of the text, I just say I'm looking for surprisers, and rather than discuss them one at a time like I did with the twins, I just write these on the board. I just say I'm going to record those things that one person circled but their partner did not. And I just matter-of-factly, okay, so tell me what it was. Somebody might say, I circled irregular paycheck, but my partner did not. And I'd say, okay, irregular paycheck, and I'd write that on the board. Somebody else might say, I circled government surplus food, and my partner did not. And I'd say, okay, government surplus food. Somebody else might say, I circled biographies, and my partner did not. At this point, I don't stop and say, what? Why'd you circle that? That's crazy. Nobody would ever circle that. You must have read it wrong, blah, blah, blah. I just say, okay, and I write the word biographies on the board. Then I back up and look at the board, and I strategically say, let's talk about these two. And I just ignore the ones that, are not going to further the conversation. Let's talk about irregular paychecks and government surplus food. And then I go back to the person who said irregular paychecks, because that person obviously gets something in the text that at least the partner didn't, and maybe the rest of the room didn't. And so I give them an opportunity to say, explain to me, why did you circle that? What does that mean to you? And I help them through that conversation if necessary. And then I ask everybody, well, do you believe then that that might be a piece of evidence that would show us his income? And, of course, they'll say yes. I'll say, okay, well, then let's all circle it. And so we all circle it again. Okay, so thanks for hanging in there. We're almost near the end. This is the last little part of the steps. And the last little part of the step is for the teacher in this here at the end to read by thinking aloud and modeling. And so you're going to do the same thing the kids did, but you're going to add you're going to speak aloud, like a think aloud, exactly how you got to that point. If the kids have already done a really nice job of outing a lot of pieces of evidence, then maybe you don't have to do the next step. But if you, as a teacher, are a little bit disappointed, you thought somebody would say, would notice minimum wage, and you thought somebody would notice middle class and government surplus food and irregular paychecks. If there's just a number of them that you wanted the kids to find that they didn't, then you say, okay, follow along. Then you say, I'm going to start at we were poor. Everybody find it? Put your finger right there. Okay. We were poor by most standards. Wait a minute. You'd say, I think I just heard an outright, in-your-face, actual, just came right out and said it, explicit evidence of his income. What is that word? And hopefully somebody will say poor. You say, okay, well then I'm going to circle that. You guys agree, right? You're going to circle it too. But one of my parents usually managed to find some minimum wage job or another. Guys, I circled minimum wage job. Let me tell you why. And then, if nobody else has had this discussion yet, if this was not a point of evidence that got brought to the attention of the full group, then at that point you go ahead and bring it up, which made us middle class by reservation standards. And then you might even explain to them, guys, I also circled middle class by reservation standard, and let me tell you why. And then explain to them, about reservation standard and how that might be different, and then talk than just the standards themselves, and how middle class by reservation standards might even be lower than middle class regular standards. I had a brother and 3 sisters, and then you might say, guys, I actually even circled that, because that's a pretty big family, and and then you might want to say so that's another example of something I inferred, that's not explicit. I inferred that. We lived on a combination of irregular paychecks, hope, fear, and government and surplus food. And you might say, I circled irregular paychecks, and here's why, and help them know what irregular means. And then say, and I also circled government surplus food. And, of course, you might not have to have this final step where you're circling all kinds of things and explaining it to them, because as a group of 20 or 30 or whatever, they might have managed to out a lot of these different kinds of options. Okay, so we're almost done. What you have now then are an annotation in a sense, and an annotation of the text that the kids have done, full group or small group, right? And you then can tell the students, okay, we we want to take each of these different examples that we've circled, and we want to make a sentence out of it. And you can have the students work in small groups. You can assign one group 3 different circles and say, so you're going to come up with 3 sentences. You could give some groups sentence strips so that they have part of the sentence already written. And you can talk to them also about, well, if we're going to tie this back into examples of his income, we might have the expected beginning for our paragraph of Sherman Alexie in his passage entitled Superman and Me uses many examples to indicate his income, and you could phrase that in many different ways. You could have some kids where you basically tell them to go ahead and write about how Sherman Alexie uses details in this passage to indicate his income or to describe his socioeconomic status. With other kids, you could walk them sentence through sentence along the way. But what we're trying to lead up to at the end of this, and I hope I have this written down. If I don't, I'm going to have to write it real fast. But what we're leading up to here with the kids is we want to be able to say, look at what you just did. You just did a Common Core performance task. You just did a constructed response. You basically accomplished having the constructed response question and your analysis completed. And this is what you could show them. And I apologize I didn't have the slide in here earlier. I just remembered that I need to put that in there. But you can back them into the prompt by showing them this. You basically just read the passage by Sherman Alexie, analyze the ways in which he indicates his income through example, write an analysis that details how the author shows his income. Be sure to use examples from the text to support your answer. So my point in this is that we want to have, and I think it's sort of cool to have it as like the last thing, is to show them this is what you just did. These kind of fancy, intimidating prompts that say, read this, analyze that, write about this, use examples, cite your evidence, those are not impossible. As a matter of fact, you just did one, right? And I know that this is going to be a process for students, but the more qualitatively rich passages they can experience and tackle with with the support of you as the best reader in the room and the strategic organizer of discussion in the room, the better off they will be. And to take the close reading and to insist that it then become a close writing, even if it's just a paragraph, or even if it's just a sentence. Like, let's make one sentence that we know would be an expected effective sentence in this kind of a analysis of the passage by Sherman Alexie. Even if you give them just examples of sentences and say, which of these sentences do you think would go in this kind of a response? Which of these sentences do you think do not go in this kind of response? Then that's going to be very helpful for them. So let me back up for just a moment, and obviously I need to get all of the annotations off of that. I want to show this slide again. This is the meat of the idea behind the close reading. Depending on how much time you have, depending on where your students are, what grade level, etc., what resources you have, then that will determine how you actually work a close reading in your classroom. But folks have asked sometimes, well, how many close readings should I be doing? And of course, I don't have the answer to that. It just depends on you know, the work you have to do with the kids you have. But I can say this, if I were in the classroom right now, I would probably try to have a close reading experience like this once every 15 days or so. And I would want it to be so purely intending to serve as a confidence builder and a test of our work with rigorous text, that I would not complicate it with other things. I wouldn't give grades on it. I wouldn't use a text that we needed to read for another reason, like, just sort of like, work double time with the text. I would just purely say this next 30 or 35 minutes or however long I'm going to give it is just for us to become better readers and for us to take a look at something that's really too hard for us, but to manage to get through it anyway. And I'm going to use this process, and I'm going to get the kids talking and circling and pointing and discussing and rationalizing, and and I would not confuse it with other issues. Of course, like all things, this is a strategy that you can now adapt in whatever way you choose, but that's just how we were taught how to do it. Let me leave you with a reminder of the web page where I'm housing a bunch of this stuff. It's at tinyurl.com/close-reading-resources with a capital C, capital R, and a capital R. I hope that this has been in some way helpful to you. I hope you will remember also that there are other passages and suggested close reading tasks and text suggested on that webpage for you, particularly at the Achieve the Cores link. And let me know if there is something I can help you with. I'm going to return back to my webinar now and make sure that it's unmuted so that if anybody has any questions, y'all can ask questions. Okay, I've managed to unmute it now. Do y'all have any questions? I'm going to put the recording also on that webpage. So if you want anybody else to listen to this recording with you, or if you want to just go back and listen to a part of it, you'll be able to access it. Thanks again for joining me live, Holly, because it's no fun to talk to myself. But I'm glad that we do have others who are going to access it, access the recording. Feel free to contact me if there is something I can do to help you. And my email address, again, is bbishop@garisa.org. Thanks.